What's up, ladies and gentlemen, boys and girls around the world? I would like to welcome you back to the Real Talk with Zuby podcast. Today, we've got on a very special guest. This is a man who I have learned plenty from over the last couple of years. He is a YouTube creator, a video marketer, public speaker, all around social media, personal branding expert, and he's just a good dude as well. This is Roberto Blake. Welcome to the show, man.
Thank you so much for having me, and I appreciate that intro. It's super flattering.
That's all good, man. And it's all honest too. It's all honest. I don't gas people up.
That's what I like to hear.
That's awesome, man. So I've given a quick little intro there. Why don't you introduce yourself to the audience and listeners who don't know you?
So for the people who don't know me, I style myself as a creative entrepreneur, and part of what that means is I think everyone understands that an entrepreneur is somebody who runs their own business. They're independent. They don't work a 9-to-5 job for a boss. They work for themselves, and they're responsible to their customers and their clients, and that's all they answer to in most cases. Creative entrepreneur, someone who has learned to commoditize talent, whether it's their own talent and their intellectual property or even other people's. And in my case, I commoditize my skills as a creative individual in terms of communication, branding, marketing, and content creation. And I use that to help educate people. And I think of myself very much as an educator and advocate for other creative people who want to either have a successful career in corporate America like I did for many years, or they want to pursue that creativity as a full-time freelancer. Sorry about that. Or if they want to turn their creative endeavors into some sort of business or funnel their creative skills and put that behind some very practical business. So, I mean, that's how I, style myself when I introduce myself as a creative entrepreneur, a public speaker, and the platform I've marketed myself in most successfully in terms of follower count or vanity metrics is YouTube.
That's awesome, man. And on YouTube and on other platforms, what are some of the highlights or successes that you've had so far? I saw you've recently hit 400,000 subscribers. Is that right?
400,000 subscribers in content consistently since July of 2013. Everyone starts a channel in 2009 and never does anything with it. That was me too. But 2013 is when I got serious, making at least a video a week. The big highlight for me is work ethic. I've done about maybe 1,300 videos now. There's not a lot of people who can say that. Even people who've been on this platform for a decade, there are people who can't say that. Work ethic, as you know, is the thing I probably respect the most. Even if I don't like someone's personality, I respect their work ethic and their hustle if I see it and if it's real. So I'm very proud of the library of work that I've made. I'm proud that those videos are videos that I think have meaning. There's nothing wrong with entertainment. A lot of my friends in YouTube, people bigger or smaller than me, a lot of them do great entertaining content. I mean, one of my favorite channels is Slice and Rice. They're a couple who does some like really great, funny, lighthearted comedy stuff. And I think we all need that in a world where we're bombarded by so many things and so many signals, so many things making people feel inadequate, stressing them out. I think that's great that people like Slice and Rice or my friend Swoop make funny entertaining content. One of the things I'm passionate about is the fact that the economy of the 21st century is different. And I think that people don't realize that high income skills are accessible and that you don't have to go into a massive amount of debt. You don't have to start your adult life in debt. Most people in the United States of America start their adult life in debt and they die in debt. And that's a big problem. I also think that a lot of creative people have their creativity beaten out of them by their elders and by life and by society, and that they're living unfulfilled lives where they don't find value and meaning in their work because it's diminished. They're not being their authentic selves. They're not living their purpose that they were put on earth for. And I want to help them understand that they can do that, not be a starving artist. As a musician, I'm sure you relate to that. Yeah. You don't have to be a starving artist in the 21st century. In the 21st century, there are people making $90K a year talking about Jurassic Park and Star Wars. Okay, in the digital era, you don't have to be at the behest of the music industry mafia. You can go directly to iTunes and Spotify hustle, work your face off, and earn and own all of your intellectual property and all of your hard work. So I'm glad that I've done over 1,000 videos teaching people about how to develop their craft, because I've done tutorials on practical software that people can use to make real money. You know, there are people fighting for $15 an hour. How about learning a skill for free that can get you $500 a day on an execution of a deliverable versus time for money to effort? How about that? Or how about if I teach you to use Photoshop and you can make $50 in 30 minutes instead of $15 an hour minimum wage? You know, I have nothing but respect for people who believe that people should, you know, get more. But the reality is the 21st century economy is moving to artificial intelligence and automation. And the thing that a robot can't do is be creative. And there are also technical detailed skills that people still can do with their hands as far as trade skills. The problem is in the 21st century, you got to learn how to market yourself so that if you do that kind of work, because not everyone's going to be, you know, a Photoshop expert or a musician or a writer or a filmmaker. And I respect people who work with their hands. But I do think that in the 21st century, if you want to make a living, you better learn how to sell yourself. And I think you have to take advantage of all the great tools and the marketing, the free platform. You don't have to go and have thousands of dollars for a billboard anymore, dude. You got Instagram. And I think that people should have access to that. I think people should learn how to make the most of the opportunity they have right now. And that's what I'm proud of. I'm proud that in my social media platforms, I'm educating people. A lot of it's free. I've done some paid online courses. I have a course that I did with lynda.com through LinkedIn Learning. Now, granted, I get royalties on that. I obviously sell some of my own programs and some of my own download templates and things like that. But I'm really proud of the community that I've built and the people that I've seen take themselves out of bad situations and believe in themselves and build something worthwhile. So, you know, that's what I'm proud of. I'm proud of my community.
That's awesome, man. I can definitely relate to that, because I know with myself as a musician and as an artist, the thing that drives me most, it goes way beyond the, you know, what you called vanity metrics. So it's always nice to see the number of followers going up. It's nice to see, you know, I've had some pieces of content go viral and it's cool to see that. But to me, nothing beats, either in the real world, I mean, it's best in the real world or online. But if someone comes up to me and is like, you know, either this song of yours or just something you said there, or just kind of watching you over the past couple of years doing your own independent music grind and doing it like that, that's inspired me to, even if it's not in something creative, like you said, you know, so many people have dreams and ambitions that are way beyond what they're currently doing. But I think that fear of judgment of society, plus, you know, the way the schooling system is, the way parents often raise their children, right? You've got all these forces that are just telling you, like, look, just stay in this lane, do this thing. This thing has always worked. And as you alluded to, we're reaching this brave new world where, yeah, some of those things do still kind of work, but the seams are starting to kind of split a little. People are getting a little skeptical about college and a whole bunch of other things. People are making money and becoming known in ways which, you know, like
didn't exist 10 years ago.
Exactly. What was an influencer 10 years ago? If you said that word, people would just kind of look at you like, you're an influencer. Like, okay, that's a little, it's a little presumptuous.
You know, like I met this wonderful woman, Peggy Glenn. You probably have heard of her, Grandma Potty Mouth. She went viral a while back in YouTube. She's got about 200,000 subscribers. Okay. You know, she's about like 75 years old, wonderful lady. Hearing her story though, and that she edits all of her own YouTube videos, you know. Oh, wow. She's 75 years old. She taught herself video editing. She got on, you know, YouTube, and she's got a cookbook. It's this, she's adorable, right? But the fact that somebody's grandmother or great grandmother taught themselves social media and edits her own videos in iMovie and is good at it and makes her own YouTube videos and posts them and does everything, is just so extraordinary to me, because it means there's no excuses. And the thing is, she had this wonderful life. I saw her speak and I learned more about her backstory. She went into the self-publishing industry in the 80s. Oh, wow. She learned new software in the 80s and the 90s, there was a point where she was unemployed. Her, you know, like parents and grandparents went through like the depression. She's lived, she's seen that you have to hustle and you have to fight and that nothing's given to you. And again, she was a woman in a time where like there wasn't as many opportunities. So she's seen it all. She's seen it all, and she's like a wonderful person. She's a great inspiration, but it put it into perspective for me that the things that we're doing today, a lot of them existed. It's just that people didn't break through and people didn't become entrepreneurs as much back then. And there were opportunities and there were work from home businesses in the 80s and the 90s that I didn't know existed and that most people don't know existed. And I'm so tired of people like frou-frouing on it and shitting on it and thinking that it's for lazy people or anything like this. So, because I'm finding out that like secretly this has been here for decades and it's just now really our time, and people were fighting them. I'm going to punch people in their throat until they accept it, because the new world is here. And I'm sorry, I hate to break it to you, the world that your parents and your grandparents romanticize is dead. It's been dead for a minute. It's been artificially kept alive. It's been undead, living this unnatural, unholy existence that's done nothing but perpetuate mediocrity.
Ooh, I felt that in my soul. We're gonna have to take that clip and like I'm gonna have to do something with that clip right there, man. That was dope.
Yeah.
So I want to talk about the future and where things are going, but before we get to that, I'd like to find out a little bit more about you. I've been subscribed to your YouTube channel for, I want to say 3 or 4 years now.
Right on.
For 3 or 4 years. And I feel like I know a lot about your thoughts on like personal branding and marketing and all that. And I've heard like kind of like little snippets of your story, but I want to get to know Roberto Blake. So let's rewind and tell us a little bit about you yourself. Like, where did you grow up? What were you like as a kid? What things were you into? And kind of what's led you on this journey?
I need to find a way that where people will actually watch it, doing some story time videos where I talk, because I don't talk about myself. That's why I've done so many videos and people know my opinions about a lot of things, but I think that people understand the things I believe in. I don't think they have context on why I believe in them or where I come from a lot of times. So my name's Roberto Blake for a reason, and I'm Roberto Blake II, actually, for a reason. My father came to this country from Panama, and all of my grandparents on both sides were born in Panama. So I'm a first generation American, you know. My father came here as a teenager with his 3 older brothers. His 2 youngest siblings were born here, my aunt and my uncle, and he essentially came here with nothing. And he grew up, in not a great situation in Panama, back then, under Noriega, and, there's a lot of stuff that goes into the history of Panama if you look into the region that I won't dive into, but, and it being adjacent to Colombia. But he had a hard life. And, his father wasn't in his life for a lot of it. And I never met my grandfather. I never met my father's father. I met all of my other grandparents, and I had a relationship with all of my other grandparents. I never met my grandfather before he passed away, cancer. My father did reconcile with him before he passed. And so that's always something that I think about a lot, is the fact that that's somebody who's a part of my story that I'll never really know. I'll never hear his side of things. I'll never hear what his experiences were. And that part of my history is lost to me forever, So that's something I think about a lot, is that, which is why, even though my father, he's since retiring from the military, moved back to Panama, I have a good relationship with him now, even though we were estranged in my young adulthood, especially with my parents' divorce, which I'll get to, in a minute. But so my dad came to this country, and he finished school a year early and joined the United States Marine Corps. And, my parents got married and dated in their early 20s. I was born roughly like a year later. And, in many ways, because of his own situation and his own relationship with his father, and then later with his stepfather, um, you know, it's apparent to me in hindsight that no one's ever really truly prepared to be a parent. But my father and some of the things I experienced stem completely from his fear of failure and of not being able to get it right. And I think in many ways that haunts people. And I've talked to him about it many times since, because even though there's a lot of things I don't entirely forgive or forget, I accept that he was doing the best that he knew how.
Sure.
And that there's not really a manual for parenting, even though there's nothing but judgment for it. My
Very true.
mother, my mother and my father was a Marine. He was going through a lot. He was also a Marine in a time where there was a lot of, it wasn't maybe as popularized or because we didn't have social media and things like that. But you have to remember at the time that our parents were in, racism was different in this country. Discrimination was different. Even nationalism was different. It just wasn't necessarily called or labeled. But you had a lot of people, even subordinates of my father, who disrespected him because they wanted to feel they were more American than him, wanted to think they were more special than him. I understand pride in your country, but I think that, and this is controversial to say, but I'll say it here, I think that the idea of American exceptionalism is flawed because it's in a form of elitism that says because you won the lottery and you were born in what might be one of the greatest nations in the world, what might be one of the greatest nations in history, you didn't earn that. That was random. You could have been born into a country where you would live on $1 a day in absolute poverty, like 1.6 billion people in the world. You literally won a 1 out of 6 fucking dice roll, and you think that makes you better than somebody else because you were blessed? Fuck you. So I mean, that's just my honest feeling about it. And I feel that way because my father, served this country just like everybody else that puts on the uniform. And you know what? He didn't get the same respect because he had an accent and because of where he came from.
Yeah.
And he loved this country in a way that only somebody who's seen the difference and lived with it can fully appreciate. I will never, for as long as I live, love this country the way my father loved this country.
Yeah.
I will never appreciate what America is the way my father and every other immigrant appreciates what.
Yeah, I think that lack of gratitude and perspective, I feel, is a big problem in the Western society in general at the moment. I just think, I don't know if it's due to lack of traveling or over comfort, not enough difficulty, living in such peaceful and people think we're living in crazy times, but we're living in very peaceful times and have been for the past few decades.
Yeah,
and
everything's relative, by the way, to individual experience.
It is. Yeah, it is. Yeah, no, that's powerful. But I don't want to interrupt you, man. Carry on.
Yeah, no, I mean, it just was making me think too, and everything like that. Growing up, and later when things were a little harder after my parents' divorce. I realized that there was envy in myself of some of my friends who I thought had it easier. And I'm reminded of, I don't remember entirely where I heard this phrase, but just because someone lives in a nice house doesn't mean nice things are happening there. Like nice things aren't necessarily going on in the inside. And I later would find that out, that some of my friends envied me because they liked coming to my house because that was their escape from their house. No matter how nice it was, I was like, why can't we go to your house? Your house is so nice and blah, 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 and everything like that. And they wanted to come to my house because in my house, nice things for the most part were happening. Yeah. And they were made to feel special and they were made to feel good and they had support when they came into my home. And the way my family treated people, there were a lot of people who they might have been blessed financially, but they weren't blessed in another way.
Absolutely. I mean, one thing I always try to say to people and remember myself is that when you're seeing other people, especially people who look like they're further along than you, or they're more successful, or they're living the life you want, or, I always try to tell people you're normally just seeing 1 or 2 dimensions of things. So you might see someone down the street, and I don't know, say they've got like a flashy car, or they've got a big house, or they're wearing some, nice clothes. You've got something that provokes envy in other people.
Yes.
And I always just remind them, like, you don't know what that guy's dealing with. Like, you don't know. He could be there, but you don't know what's going on. Like he could be going through some huge problem in his relationship, having some problems with his children. He could be having financial difficulty. You know, there's so much stuff because I think people. I mean, I guess it's natural to compare yourself to other people.
It is, but comparison is the theft of joy.
It is.
I think often about like what happened with Robin Williams, Kate Spade, Chester Bennington, Mac Miller. You know, like
a lot of musicians, man. Big problem in music.
Like you have music, entertainment, and you hear less about it. But even in entrepreneurship, you have all these people, and they're successful. They have money. They have everything you could want. And they kill themselves, and then we all cry. We all say it was unfortunate. It's before their time. And we don't stop to think about what, like, and then we just say, oh, well, you know, it was mental illness. It was a bad roll of the dice. It was this or it was that. And we're ignoring a fundamental truth of society as a whole, but at scale that I've been trying, you know, I talk about this in Twitter, is like, I genuinely believe, and a lot of people disagree with this, but the thing is, as you know me, you have context on me. I believe in meritocracy more than most people, to the point of almost a religion. You know, I believe in individual responsibility to the point of holding myself to unreasonable standards that probably I'd be healthier without. Like, that all being said, you know, I've come around to almost a supervillain Machiavellian point of view that society is to blame for most of the ills in the world, in the sense that the social agreements that we make, the social contract that we make, and this goes well beyond political or ideological spectrum. It's like, the reality is the framework that we currently operate in at a social level is wildly toxic and produces only a couple of byproducts: suffering, mediocrity, squandered potential, and massive debt. And the person who I think is most adamantly and putting this into real perspective for people is probably Gary Vaynerchuk. Okay. I think that what he says about keeping up with the Joneses, you know, it's funny. Gary V is the non-toxic version of Tyler Durden in some ways. He's a more enlightened. In my opinion, when I think about it, there's a lot of differences where, like, Gary V is a much better dude, obviously. But I think there's a similar thesis. Do you remember Tyler Durden's monologue about the children of middle history?
I do not. It's been a while since I've
So if I'm gonna paraphrase the monologue, it's like, I look around and I see all this squandered potential. You know, it's like, we don't have a great war. Our great war is a spiritual war. Our Great Depression is our lives. We keep working jobs we hate to buy shit we don't need. And I would add to that, to impress people we don't like.
Yeah.
And and when I think about that, I think about what Gary Vee says about judgment without context. We judge all these people that we think have it better to us in Instagram and YouTube and in social media and all these things. We judge them without any context as to whether there's a void in their life that they're trying to fill, or whether having their life would even fix our own shit and make us happy.
Yeah.
Like, I look at everybody and I'm like, there's nothing about living their life that would fix what's wrong with me. There's nothing about having what they have that would fix what's wrong with me.
Yeah.
So it's not going to get better. And then I think about the thing that makes it better is working on yourself, personal development, self-improvement, the things, finding meaningful work. Tony Robbins talks a lot about this. You know, people who are much more religious talk about the importance, and even people who are non-religious, about the importance of a purpose-driven life.
Yep.
And I think Tyler Durden was alluding to the fact that the children of middle history, the modern man, the modern woman, were in the current era, and this was even earlier than we are now, are defined primarily by their lack of purpose. Lack of purpose.
Yep. And
lack of purpose, to Gary Vee's point, comes from a lack of self-awareness. And I also think a lack of optimism. To Jordan Peterson's point, I don't know how familiar you are with him. There's
extremely.
He's a controversial figure, but if you take all of that aside.
No, I love the dude. You don't need to give disclaimers with it.
But if you take all of that, well, you know, for people also who don't have context on me, because I don't agree with him on everything, but I don't agree with everyone on everything. There are things I disagree with Gary Vee, like how I was constantly saying Snapchat is going to be real, like, but my point being that if you look at the things he says about personal development, if you look at the things he says about the importance of finding your purpose and finding meaning in your hardships, and that you can elevate yourself above the suffering that you are enduring, that, okay, here's suffering, here's the good news. That's hard. You can be more than that. You don't have to be defined. Do you realize that one of the biggest problems is that the only identity many people have is their struggle or their mental illness or their poverty? Mm-hmm. That's literally the only identity they have. But we have a social fabric and a social construct that labels people and lets you only be one thing.
What do you mean when you say that?
The framing, you experienced this. You talked about it. The fact that for some people, they're going to find something you said or did to put the label liberal or conservative on you, and they're only going to see you from the perspective of how they view someone who's liberal or conservative. And in their mind, they have what might be called binary thinking or black and white thinking, where you're only allowed to be that. You're that or you're not.
Gotcha.
And you're nothing else. In the same way that there are people who are going to look at you and they're going to judge you from the frame of what their assumptions or experience are of someone who's black.
Yep. Yeah.
So and you can't be anything more than that. Primary example, I'm black, but I'm also Latino. I'm black, but I'm also from an immigrant family. I'm black, but I'm also affluent. Somebody black might mean poor. Black might mean thug. Black might mean criminal. Black might mean ghetto. Black might mean urban. The assumption that black means African American. What's Idris Elba then? You can have a different culture or context. You can have a different culture or context. It's like what's somebody who's from Trinidad? What's someone from Jamaica? From Jamaica, I mean, they are in America. I know people who are black in America. They're Nigerian.
Of course, man. That's why like with that one, I get a little bit annoyed when I hear terms like the black experience or like even the black community, because I'm like, what do you mean the black community? Like there are a billion plus black people in the world, right?
There's different experiences at an individual. Like I'm a champion of individualism.
Yes, me too. Absolutely. Because this is the thing, because when people are like, the Black American experience, I'm like, is there a Black American experience? Surely there's like several million of them. Like your experience is not going to be the same as.
Like when I interpret that, because I also try to give benefit of the doubt, when I interpret that, I think that they might be talking about the concept of benefit of the doubt. Well, see, when I was growing up, because we were military and I lived on military base, more context on my history. The military has its own culture. And because you're in the military, you're going to, or you're a military family, you're going to travel the world, is presumably. You're going to go to different states, you're going to go to different countries, that's the deal that you sign on for. So the thing is, in some ways, you become less entrenched or less, you take on the cultural identity of everything that goes with the military lifestyle, which is actually very separate from the generalized American experience. That doesn't mean that there's not things like racism or, or bigotry or things of that, because people are individuals, but being military, there's a baseline of we've got it good and we're all military families that have like things that we go through in terms of anxiety of waiting for the other shoe to drop. When we lose somebody, we all feel it in the community. There was like it's a very different culture, and it's a very different network that you belong to that's separate from every other experience that you have culturally in this country. If you're in a military family, if you're military adjacent, right? So I say that to say the fact that it's like when I would get lost as a kid, like I wasn't the black kid. I was like wandering the streets. I was another military brat. So like people were nice to me, gave me directions, or even rode me home, or like, I could go to their house, have like literally have this, the 90s now, milk and cookies, not be molested and be taken back home to my parents in one piece.
Yeah. It sounds kind of similar to my background. I mean, I don't know if I grew up actually in Saudi Arabia. And I lived in like an expat community that sounds a little bit similar. to what you're describing, you know. So where I lived, it was kind of like if you imagine a small town where everybody works for the same company. So
Right.
like, you know, it's all, I mean,
Yeah.
it's a talking about something. This is something, this will crack some people up. It wasn't until I was like age 11 or 12, and when they used to have Jerry Springer on TV, that was when I realized it was possible for people to have a child without being married.
Yeah.
I didn't know that was actually possible until I was 11 or 12, because it didn't exist where I grew up.
It's like when we moved off the military base and my parents were doing their like first separation, and like we moved to Atlanta before I moved back here as an adult. Like when we moved to Atlanta when I was like a kid, I was like 9 or something or whatever. Like the urban kids were wildly different, and I was introduced to phrases and things that I'd never heard of. Like I didn't know, like, well, what's gay, or what's that word mean, or what's that F word mean? Like I didn't like. You're a military brat. You're taught to be respectful. You're taught to be polite. You're taught like to have your manners. You're taught to respect everybody's culture. You're taught that you're a guest in people's home. Like you are raised very the discipline. And I think that's a big fundamental part of my childhood that framed who I was as an adult. The discipline of having a military father, the discipline of being in sports as a kid, the discipline and the respect was very much rooted into me. And it was respect for my dad and my mom taught me less respect for authority and more respect for work ethic and good people, because my parents were a little bit rogue, like my mom especially, like in the sense that my parents took a lot of shit for not forcing me to conform, respect authority, and to not always 100% accept the rules, but learn all the rules. Learn all the rules, but if you don't agree with them, you don't always have to follow them. And that was like a very weird thing to teach a kid, but they'd been through things where they knew the rules aren't always right, and the rules aren't always made for you. Like, you know what I mean? Like
do you have an example of something like that? Is there any like particular instance in your childhood or something where
I'm trying to think. I can't remember the exact details, but my mom ended up calling out another adult because I caught an adult in a lie and called them out publicly on it. And then that adult tried to shut me up, and my mom wasn't having it. And then they tried to shame her into I should respect adults and respect authority and everything like that. My mom called this person out on why should he respect you when you just tried to lie and you were caught?
Yeah.
And that makes a real difference, because it's like taught to respect authority, the truth, and hold people accountable. Power doesn't entitle anyone to a pass. Like, and that's something that really stuck with me. And it also like is probably why I had to at some point become an entrepreneur, because there's a point where you can't work for people if you believe that, and not be happy, because I was miserable being in corporate and having to be a yes man and smile in people's faces, and that came to a head, you know. But like, so I mean, that's an example of that. And the fact that neither of my parents told me who to be. My mom and dad never told me who to be. They made sure that I was lawful good, that I understood right from wrong, that I understood the importance of being respectful, of being honest, you know, of being truthful, and also, but they taught me to protect myself. They taught me the importance, like, don't let people, and it was a hard lesson and I didn't always get it right. They taught me, like, don't let people take advantage of you.
Yeah.
Don't let people abuse you.
Yeah.
Like, and it was hard because I didn't always know how to do that. I didn't always know how to fight back, but they never made it to where I shouldn't fight back, or where I felt like, well, I guess this is okay because it's somebody in authority.
Yeah.
They always taught me to stand up for myself, and I had to figure out how to do that on my own. They never told me how to go about it. They didn't judge me for how I went about it if I got it wrong. And they didn't tell me I had to be this or I had to believe in things that, like, they helped me figure out who I was and how to make me successful at that. And the same for all of my siblings. They never told us, like I have 3 younger siblings. They never told us who to be. They never told us how to think. And they never told us what we had to believe in. They presented us with everything that they knew and everything they could find and anyone they could find that could help us figure out our potential or our gift. Like I had artistic ability and I had gifts and I had the gift of gab. They did everything to try to make me make the most of those things. When they figured out that I was good with computers and technology, they did everything they could for me, everything they could afford to do.
Sure.
Within reason. They couldn't always say yes to everything, but they never made me feel bad about who I was. They always said yes to me as a person. They couldn't always tell me yes. They could always give me a yes.
And that's a good thing though, isn't it? I mean, you don't want, I think there's a danger with people who grow up in an environment or with parents who do say yes to everything and do give them every demand, because it just creates that sense of entitlement, right? It makes you think that, okay, money just falls from the sky. Mommy and daddy have infinite everything. And, then people meet the real world and they're kind of like, oh, wait, like, where's my job? Where's my paycheck? I want this, I want that. And it's like, well, you've got to, this is something that I'm still trying to perfectly sort of master in my own life. I've been a full-time musician now for 7 years. So
right.
I'm not, I'm not under the water or anything, I'm not completely sinking, but I know I'm not, I know I'm just scraping the surface of my potential. I'm still trying to work out how, with my talents and my skill sets, I can offer kind of maximum value to the world. And,
at some point of our conversation, I definitely want to talk on that.
Okay.
But I want to hit on something you said, because I also want to counterpoint something. So like my mom is a saint. She's not perfect, but when I say she's a saint, I mean, she's a saint for putting up with me and for being able to live with all the shit that comes from having a weird kid who's very smart, believes himself to be always right. But the downside is that 95% of the time he is, because I wanted to always be right.
Yeah.
I wanted to be smarter than everybody else. So I read more than everybody else. And I did facts and I did this. And I was blessed with a high IQ, but I also worked my ass off to often be the smartest person in the room at 10 years old. And when you have a kid like that and you're a parent, especially from a more traditional background or around a community of traditional people, it's eating shit every day. And so I appreciate my mom being a saint and putting up with that and not conforming and doing the easy thing and managing me or stifling me or putting me in a child's place when I had an intelligence level that was above that. She always treated me like what I was, an intellectual, a very smart human. But she also never took my intelligence for granted and let me think I had everything figured out. And she always held me accountable and to a standard where if I'm going to say that I'm right, I have to back it up. I have to prove it. I have to validate it. I have to have evidence. I have to cite where my sources are. I have to align my facts, or I have to have a logical explanation for things. And I have to communicate why, especially since as a child, I won't be given the benefit of the doubt. And especially as a person of color, I might not be. That she never really drilled in as much specifically. She never called it out or said, well, because you're black or this or that. Neither of my parents ever did that, believe it or not.
Good.
But what they did was they just, it is and it isn't, in the sense of I didn't have, because what happened is I didn't appreciate and I didn't understand certain danger signs of things. And I was probably too comfortable in, oh, this will be okay, or people will understand. That probably, I understood why they did it, because they didn't stigmatize or make me feel different in that way, especially since I was different enough in the sense that I'm the weird kid. I'm into art. I'm into science. I'm into all these things that at the time weren't accepted, especially in the Black community, in an urban area at the time, especially in the South. Like there's this whole traditionalism that I didn't fit. There's just traditional view of what a boy is, what a man is, all these things that actually, in hindsight, I I think that a lot of people squandered their potential and alienated themselves from successful habits because they didn't want to be judged as different and weird like I was and get beat up. And now I'm happy that I got my ass kicked every day, because if it's worth it to not be pumping gas or tending bar,
Yeah.
or at the behest of a prick boss, totally worth it.
Yeah.
But
Yeah.
other people weren't willing to take those lumps. And I think in hindsight, they would have rather been the nerd that got their ass kicked to win later 30 years. You know, like I think that there are a lot of people who've come to Jesus on that, you know, had that moment. So like what my mom was a saint in that regard, and she was like very much like, I would guess, like Gary Vee. We had, I think, a similar childhood in the sense that my father was the disciplinary. He was also military, and then so he was gone a lot, and then my parents got divorced, and then, you know, he was still always involved. And, you know, I did Boy Scouts and we did stuff, you know, and I always knew, you know, I always knew my dad. I always knew who he was, and I had my own relationship with him, and it wasn't always the best. Sure. But we also didn't have each other fully figured out. And I think most of our issues were how similar we were, and the fact that he didn't always know how to communicate where he was coming from. And I just was in my hurt as a child and not feeling fully accepted by him, even though he did fully accept me. Gotcha. But he didn't understand, especially with the, you know, he was very smart and very fluent, but when you come from another country, you think in one language and you speak in another. There's a disconnect. And then he also is coming from multiple layers of a different culture, and not only culture heritage wise and like from a national like perspective of the day to day. I'm talking experience level wise of he's someone who grew up poor and made it, and then made sure his kid didn't grow up that way. And so I could never relate to him fully as a child, let alone between our age gap. Even as an intellectual, I just wouldn't have context.
Yeah.
I was judging my dad without context as a kid, which I get a pass for being a kid, but you know.
Yeah. One thing that's interesting, I mean, I found that, you know, like I've got fantastic parents. I'll be seeing them tomorrow. God bless them. You know, I can't fault the way they've raised me or any of my siblings. You know, they've been fantastic, and they've been there for us and still are. And I know that's not something everyone has, so I feel very blessed for it. But I find that as I get older, I appreciate them even more, because I think, right, when you're a kid, just adults in general and your own parents, you just think adults know everything. It's just like, they've got it all figured out. They've got it, you know, and then you reach that age, you know, where you're that age where your parents had you, right? Like when I think, I mean, I'm the youngest of 5, and I think my mom was around my age when I was born, right? Yeah. So like by my age, my mom had like 4 or 5 kids. Do you see what I mean? And when I'm in that position, I'm like, holy crap. Like if I had 5 kids, I'm like, dude, like someone give me a manual, give me a playbook, give me like 10 assistants. I'm just like, wow. For me, you know,
that came early with being an older brother, and then being an older brother in a single parent home. Like I grew up fast already because of my intelligence, and because of, you know, being alienated at a certain age and not having, like, when I didn't grow up on the military base anymore, it became a lot harder in some ways to make friends, even though in hindsight I realized that I had a little bit of a charismatic or magnetic personality. There were just some social barriers, stigma-wise, to people wanting to be friends with somebody that's called out as the nerd. And I was able to break through some of that and have friends and not always be completely alone, because I had innate charisma. I just didn't know what that was at the time or how to always utilize it. It became something I started to grasp in the last stages of high school and in the early stages of college, of the ability to do that and to understand how the gift of gab really works. It's something that I'd worked so hard at getting smart that I never had developed fully my social skills. And I was coasting on my natural charisma for any of my friendships and relationships. Like Any of my friendships and relationships, any of my relationships with girls was all built off of my innate charisma, not off of ever learning social skills or social graces. That came in my 20s. That came in my mid 20s. And then I developed into closer to what you guys see today in the last stage of my 20s. Like after 25, when you get your prefrontal cortex developed and everything like that, I think my socialization started more at like 27, 28 of like, I think I understand now. Like, and that was a lot of, effort. It was actual effort to learn social cues and to read people emotionally instead of just reading them intellectually and predicting and calculating things like, in a very almost like academic like fashion and breaking people down. Like I was very good at breaking people down and psychoanalyzing people. It's not the same thing as reading the room.
No.
Not even close.
Yeah. I mean, it's really interesting. I mean, one thing I'm just generally interested in is like personalities and, personality models. And one thing I actually like about YouTube is watching different people and, just seeing you really get to see one good thing about videos. You really get to see people's personality types, because on YouTube, everybody has to be slightly, at least pretend to be like, slightly extroverted or more talkative than they might be. But I think you can tell who the natural extroverts are and who the natural introverts are. And you can just, it's weird. You kind of get these sub cues. So I'm someone who's like, I'm natural.
Maybe you or I can. I don't think most lay people can though.
Yeah, maybe not. Maybe not. I don't know. I
think that I've met YouTubers that people think are extroverts, and I immediately recognize that they're introverted, because I think what's taken for granted is it's easy to seem extroverted in the comfort of your own home talking to an inanimate object. You're in your place of safety and security, because extroversion has more to do with energy output rather than outgoingness. You can be an outgoing introvert. I'm an outgoing introvert. There's also a spectrum of introversion and extroversion. And some people are naturally and neutrally an ambivert. Environment can shift them. I get environmentally shifted to seeming more on my extroverted self at public events. It's why people don't believe that I have social anxiety. The problem is, they're not in my chest regulating and breathing and doing what I need to do as a routine that I've learned to live with it.
Yeah.
Like they don't understand the prep that I do before I go on stage. I haven't done a video about it. There's a prep that I do before I go on stage to make myself comfortable. There's a whole routine for me being at a public speaking event, which is why my upload schedule goes to hell after I travel. There's a whole, and I have to like literally like shut out, cocoon myself, curse the world for a couple of days. Like there's a reason. There's a reason for it. And you're not in people's heads sometimes. And we all think we're so clever sometimes, because like, and me, that's why he talks about context so much. And it's why I'm negative message, is because I've lived it. I've like, wow, I've judged so many people, including my parents, without context. When I got to know my parents and know their story and know more about who I came from year after year after year, as I became a person, as an actual human being, and as they opened up to me and they felt these things were important, my respect for them elevated, and my understanding and appreciation. I also would say that when I became old enough to really appreciate it, I had a tremendous amount of guilt about taking them for granted. I was a good kid and I didn't cause them a lot of grief, but I had a lot of anger issues from being bullied. Okay. I was bullied constantly.
What were you bullied about?
Everything. I was bullied about being Black with a Latino name. I was bullied about like people teasing me about everything, like what I guess they felt were my big lips at the time, or when I wore glasses, and I wear glasses and everything like that. Yeah. I was bullied by kids at school for being in the Boy Scouts, which is one of the best things you can do sometimes as a young man. You learn about nature and survival and camaraderie, and you learn great skills. They took us hunting and fishing and hiking and exploring. You learned to be self-sufficient. We learned very important skills, woodworking, knot tying. We learned about working with our hands. There's a lot of people who go into the armed forces because of the experience that they have in the Scouts. It's a real brotherhood.
Yeah, I was a Cub Scout and then a Boy Scout.
I'm literally tearing out thinking about it because I think it's some of the happiest moments of my childhood was being in the Boy Scouts of America and what that meant to me, and to have, those bonds and to be part of something, especially as a misfit, that means a lot to you. I was bullied for being into comic books. Now they're always popular and everything like that. I was bullied for being into anime before anyone even really knew what anime was, because my uncle was really into it and got me into imports like super early. Even as a kid in the 80s and 90s and everything like that. It was like really cool to me because I wanted to be an illustrator. I wanted to be an artist. I wanted to make comic books. I wanted to work for Marvel or Disney as a kid.
So fun, dude. This is weird. Like, it's so similar to me, man.
Yeah.
Not on the bullying thing, but I wanted to be a cartoonist when I was a kid. So that was my first creative thing.
People would steal my doodles and my stuff and tear them up in front of me to make me cry.
Wow.
Because they would take bets and say, I bet you I can make them cry.
Man, kids can really be a-holes, man.
And then they wanted to make me cry because then they could call me a wuss or they could call me the F word.
Yeah. Where did you go to school? Where was this?
I was in Atlanta for a while, and then I moved to North Carolina. And I was in North Carolina for a long time. And so in Atlanta, this was a lot of it when I was super young. And then at the beginnings of preteen, teenager, it wasn't, in some ways it wasn't as bad in middle school in North Carolina. It was less of bullying me for being a nerd or being into art. That was the thing when I was much younger. And it wasn't for, the Black Latino thing. In middle school, it had more to do with the fact that I was very talkative and very into science and very much not into the things that other people my age were into. So I was like, you're weird. Why don't you just do what other people do? Or why can't you be like everybody else? It was just for being other, and, and it was hard. And then weirdly, like if a girl was into me, she'd get picked on.
Okay.
Like, it's like literally a girl would be into me and then she'd get picked on. And then she'd want to like kind of be like friends with me or into me secretly.
Yeah.
Because she didn't want to get picked on. Like, it was like so messed up. Because again, we have this social like fabric that says conform or we'll make your life a living hell. Don't be different. Join or die.
Do you think that's social fabric, or do you think that's just sort of the state of humanity? Do you know what I mean? Like sometimes I just think that I love human beings, but there's we've got good sides and we've got downsides. And I think one of those downsides is that one thing I think I've really understood over the last few years is I do believe that human beings are naturally tribal, naturally very, very tribal. And the whole in-group, out-group thing, it can be based on any number of factors. And even if there doesn't seem to be those factors, it's like people will find something. Like you could take a school or a group, a room where everybody literally like looks the same, right?
Do you know?
But you'll still find something to.
Do you know what the dark side of tribalism is?
What's that?
It's when you have bad leaders or you have populism among uneducated people. Tribalism and even democracy is fine if everyone's reasonable and if everyone's educated. If everyone isn't reasonable and everyone isn't educated, it's a problem. Do you realize how humanity would operate as a species if everybody was even close to being on Elon Musk level?
Oh, gosh.
Not just to be an Elon fanboy, but I want you to imagine a society where the baseline of human intelligence is being 10% off from Elon.
Oh, boy.
Do you realize how quickly pettiness is like ostracized at that point? Because you see, think about it like this. If the things that we socially shame people for are not things like arbitrary things, like let's say what would you say if we lived in a society, if we lived in a society where not being kind or empathetic was more shameful than being an effeminate dude or a masculine woman? Think about a society, and I'm just using those as extreme examples. I'm like, literally imagine that being an a-hole meant you will be ostracized beyond anything else. Imagine a society where being truly, truly lazy is the thing that's ostracized more than anything else. Imagine a society where you're not allowed to give up on yourself, where people will not just sit there and let you give up on yourself, where they will literally not feel, they'll feel tremendous guilt if they're not doing right by you.
Yeah.
Now that sounds like utopia. I'm not saying it wouldn't still have its problems, but I'm saying imagine a society where we operate as a species to where we realize that to combat our own extinction, it's all hands on deck and nobody's getting left behind, because we need everybody. We need every soul in the fight for elevating the human race.
Yeah.
Because when I think about the fact that like we don't have a scientific answer for a super volcano or for a solar flare, like that's a big deal. That's an all hands on deck thing, right? Like becoming an interplanetary species, that's an all hands on deck thing. And if you don't want to go that big, cancer, AIDS,
yep,
like that's an all hands on, like schizophrenia, like Alzheimer's. Can you imagine living with somebody you built a life with for 50 years and they don't know who you are anymore? Can you imagine?
I've seen it happen, not firsthand, fortunately, but I know someone who's going through that right now.
How is all the pettiness of our society day to day stacked up against that, right? Mm-hmm. So like that's the dark side of tribalism, is when I say the social fabric or the social contract or the social construct is the stupid idea that all the shit you and I see in Twitter where people are debating their liberal ideology or their conservative ideology or calling each other snowflakes or SJWs or all this nonsense, when literally we have problems that we really need to fix.
Yeah.
Like when it's like, when my answer is to be very real with you, is that I pray every day for Lex Luthor or some supervillain to literally kick everyone in the teeth and make everybody do the right thing. And by the right thing, I mean get their act together and let's go to work. Let's go to work. Let's monetize every single human being. Let's monetize every single human being. Let's raise the level of education and the baseline of education of every single human being and put them to work solving the problems that affect every single human being, because we have so much unreasonable, untapped potential that we can lift up every single person on this planet out of poverty, because we're going for the stars next.
Yeah,
we're going to take the center of the universe.
Yeah, the thing is, I hear you. The thing is, to have that kind of utopia, though, you'd need to.
I don't think it's utopia, though. Like I think no. Why not? Utilitarianism. I think it's utilitarianism as a philosophy. Meaning that we're prioritizing being useful. We're prioritizing acting with a sense of purpose. Because the thing is, you'll notice that people who are living their sense of purpose don't get drawn into those debates nearly as much as people who are living in mediocrity, people who are suffering, and people who don't know who they are.
Of course.
So I think the elevation of the individual, I think that a person who designs the life that they want is living their own utopia. Regardless of class, regardless of how much money they make a year, I think someone living on their own terms as much as they can and by their own hand is living their own version of utopia beyond their internal mental struggles or emotional suffering. So like that's one of the things that I think I very much like about Peterson's message. And I think that's where it aligns with Gary Vee's message and Tony Robbins' message, is that I believe that maximizing individual potential and becoming more utilitarian and becoming an essentialist, maybe not a minimalist, but an essentialist, of saying, is everything that I'm currently and everyone that I'm keeping in my life have a very clear purpose and role in what they do to add value to me? And am I using that to add value to not only maintaining my own existence, but to put something positive out into the world? Am I being useful? Am I a utility, or am I siphoning value? Am I, overhead? Am I an expenditure? Because
I hear that 1,000,000%, man. I just want, I guess the reason why I use the term utopia is just human nature. Human nature. So you're an exceptional individual. You know,
but the thing is, I don't think I'm that special. I think it's that. I mean, that I know that sounds like false humility when I say that, but because the thing is, I didn't come to this conclusion like that.
Yeah, sure.
I worked at it. You know what I'm saying?
Yeah.
Like, I think that everybody, if they look at themselves hard in the mirror and they just said something to themselves, they just said this one thing. It's like, I have more to give than this. I can be more than this. I have this one moment in time and I'm worthy. I think if someone said that to themselves, their life changes. I think that the way they treat people changes. I think the way they treat themselves changes, because I think that our society abuses people, and I think it starts in the mirror. I think it starts in the mirror with telling yourself you're not good enough. You're not, that you'll always be alone, that no one will accept you. I know that because it's the things I told myself that made me want to take my own life. Like, and the thing is, it's like it started with me. I was the first person to tell myself that I suck. You know what I'm saying? Like, I was the first person to not think I'm enough. And then when you think that, it affects every action of every moment, every day, and other people can sense it and they mirror it. People are a mirror of the standard we set for ourselves. Our interactions with people are often, not always, but often, a mirror of the standard of how we treat ourselves and what we'll accept from other people. Because when you don't accept shit from other people, they stop giving it to you.
Yeah, 100%, man, 100%. Yeah, wow. I think on that regard, I feel like you're more optimistic than I am. I'm extremely optimistic on an individual level, but I just know that, you know, with all the different personality types out there, you know, some people just are not very conscientious and industrious, and, you know,
Why do you think that?
I mean, part of it is just personality. I mean, you've got two factors. Of course, you've got nature and you've got nurture. So there's certainly the societal factors, but just in terms of, have you ever done like a full-blown personality test of yourself?
Here's the thing. I've done them
out of curiosity.
I've done them in cycles. And the thing is, I've learned that my own results vary based on the conditions that I've done in the last 30 or 90 days of taking the test. Now, granted, they don't vary dramatically, but they vary. And that's why I take those things with a little bit of a grain of salt. But I also, it goes to the nature versus nurture factor of, if you think about it, I remember clearly, I have such a good memory that I remember clearly who I was as a person at 5 and 6 years old, what my values were, how outgoing I was, what I believed in, how sensitive I was. I remember all of these things. And I'm going to say this in a weird way and everything like that. At who I remember myself to be from 4. And I can remember myself at 4 years old, by the way, because then that's when my sister was born. And I remember it clear as day. I remember who I was from 4 to 8 years old, and I was pure.
Yeah.
I saw the world clearly. I saw things as they were. I saw the truth, and I spoke truth to power when I saw it. I understood how to learn. I understood how to formulate a clear thought. I knew right from wrong. I was pure. And I think most children are. I think, like, when you're a kid, you see what's presented to you in a very clear way. You don't have abilities to stay, but in what you're seeing, truth, not influenced, not manipulated, not filtered, just truth. And you're conditioned to accept the reality in the frame of your elders, your culture, your society. Like, you're conditioned. You're conditioned, and you're told what to believe, who to be, what right is, even when it doesn't line up with what's in your gut. Like, you know, instinctively. When you're like that age, you're running on instinct, and it's pure. And that's what I mean. I'm not talking ideologically pure, or maybe I am, because the thing is, at 5 to 8 years old, you don't have an ideology.
Ooh, some people do, but it has to be implanted. It has to be implanted. I was just watching. Sorry, I interrupt you. I watched something yesterday. I was watching, like, it's quite an old documentary. It was one of the Louis Theroux ones.
Yeah.
But it was the one that, I don't know if you've ever seen the one he did in the Gaza Strip. And
no.
like, sorry. So when you said that, like, you're seeing these like literally like 5,
Until you're
6-year-old kids like
well,
throwing rocks and like I
asterisk
was like,
in the
whoa.
West. Asterisks in the West.
Okay.
Like,
Yeah.
But like when you or in general, however age you are, before you're introduced by your parents, by society, by culture, whatever, into a framework of thinking, you just try to figure out what the truth is. And the thing is, once you start believing in something, you don't care about the truth anymore. You care about contextualizing every piece of information to align with your beliefs or to root out heretics. Read the book if you haven't, Primal Branding. It's like a very good education on the psychology of marketing, but how much the psychology of marketing is the psychology of building religion. Marketers build religion.
Oh gosh, yeah.
Like that's what we do.
Apple is a flipping religion.
Yes, exactly. Yeah. Apple is the perfect case study in building, Google too. Apple and Google are the perfect case study in building religion. Like, I mean, and that's what marketing is. And people don't realize that. It's taking a thought and a series of thoughts. It's creating rituals. It's aligning those thoughts to actions. It's finding other true believers to validate you within your echo chamber, and then identifying heretics. It's having your own coded language. There's so much to it. And every major influencer either knows that through study or through instinct. And that's how people get big. That's how people get to 100,000, 400,000, 500,000, a million, 10 million is they're building up their thing. It's like, hey, Jake Paulers, that's the religion, right? It's like dab, that's part of the religion. That's the ritual. That's no different than this or this or this or like it's like salutes or whatever it is. Or it's like live long and prosper. I can't actually do it. Like whatever it is, right? So like there's you like everybody essentially as an influencer in some way, shape, or fashion is building their own group of, we call them followers, but where does that come from? You see what I'm saying? So like in that way, I don't think it's nefarious and I don't even think it's always intentional. Like I said, it's good marketing and it's instinctual, but the framework is that. All of that I say is this, is that the framework of that is in contrast in many ways to the values of individualism. And the values of individualism and the elevation of self, personal development, individual responsibility, self-efficacy, all of those things, meritocracy, those things are the differentiation factor between people who become the 10% or the 1% and are often misfits. And Elon was bullied. Like, and so is Steve Jobs, and so is so many other people. Like those people, the misfits of society are often, if they're not born into wealth, the millionaires and billionaires are all misfits and outliers. The people who build things, the people who build things are misfits and outliers, and everyone else works for them. Yep. And why? That's the difference between, again, a society where someone accepts and conforms to a baseline as a layperson and doesn't elevate themselves versus doing the thing that an outlier would do, aka it's one of a couple factors. You won't always be smarter than someone else, but you can be at one thing by specializing. But a lot of people won't do that. Another thing you can do is you could just acquire resources instead of consuming, and people won't do that. Another thing you can do is you could just outwork people, and people don't do that. And those are the things that separate the 10% and the 1% from everybody else, is the acquisition of secret knowledge, specialization, wild discipline and focus, outworking people, or acquiring a resource and having more resources come in than go out. Yeah. If you can do any of those things, you have a much better chance. But here's the thing. To do that, you'd have to not join. To do that, you'd have to not join. Yeah. And there's comfort in joining, and everybody does it.
Yeah. Yeah, I hear you, man. I hear you. I'm just I'm looking at this is I'm happy to sit here. I'd be happy to sit here for like I don't know how long you've got. I feel like this conversation could go for a long time. Let's move into,
I mean, I think you have more context on me than most people have ever gotten in an interview in terms of my childhood and my, like, some of my bullying story and the relationship I had with my parents. I mean, we can fast forward to a period of time that also fits more with things I know you would like to know about, maybe how I became successful or what played a role in that. So let's fast forward and jump the clock.
Yeah, absolutely, man. Cool. So let's talk a little bit more about your I guess about your YouTube journey. So was YouTube the first thing online, social media wise, that you really got into? Was that the
I
first
got into
platform?
blogging first, and I've been doing website. I started building websites at 13 years old. I'm 35 this year in June. I got into building websites at 13 years old in the AOL internet days.
Okay. So
So
talk us through that a little.
I like my grandmother who passed away cancer almost 3 years ago. She bought us a computer. It was a computer she bought from QVC. She was a CNA nurse, so she put it on her credit card. Back then, I think the whole computer package, printer, scanner, fax thing was like $2,000, and this is like 20 years ago, where that's a lot more money. And she put it on credit and paid it down on QVC on a CNA, a nurse's salary, okay,
Wow.
in New York. So she wasn't making a lot, and she made that sacrifice to give us a shot in the 21st century. And it changed my life because now I had a computer at home and not just at school, and I was into them, and it was a real computer, and it had Windows 95. And when I started learning so much about the internet, and I spent the early days of the internet on the beginning of when Wikipedia first existed and all of that. And I learned, like, I was sitting there reading, I was printing out articles, I was highlighting things. I was a massive research nerd. This is how I spent my weekends. This is how I spent my nights when everybody else was much more into video games, much more into going out to the movies, skating, all the teenage stuff. This is where my bullying story ties in, is like, I was just sitting here absorbing all the information in human history that I could get my hands on, and fascinated by it.
Yeah.
And learning about things and talking to other young people in chat rooms. My mom sitting on my shoulder if I talk to adults, because I'm like, well, I found this chat room where a lot of these people are talking about science, but they're all much older, and I want to talk to them. I want to learn about quantum physics. I want to learn about Stephen Hawking. I want them to explain this book that I read to me.
Yeah.
And so my mom,
you're exceptional, by the way, in this regard. Like, just
thanks.
Me, this is not normal.
I mean, when I was a kid, my parents bought me Zoo books and Highlights magazines. I read what they had, the reading Olympics. Even to this day, I still read about anywhere from 35 to 55 books a year.
Wow.
Everything on that shelf I've either read as a physical book or listened to as an audiobook. And when I listen to an audiobook, I then buy the physical book as a prop, kind of as a trophy to put on the shelf of like, oh, I got through that book. And so here it is. And then I also lend my books out. I actually lend my books out. And I have something I'm working on. I'm going to do a video about it because I've been donating books on entrepreneurship to the libraries, because the libraries, especially here in Atlanta, don't seem to have a lot of books on business or entrepreneurship. So I've been donating books. But now I'm going to do one of these big Mr. Beast style things where it's like, I'm going to donate $1,000 of books to the library and make a video.
Yeah, man, do it.
So that's going to be a fun video to make. But my parents and my grandma really set me up for success by making me a speed reader, helping me learn different things, focusing on my communication skills, which was very important to my father, that we could speak well, speak articulately, speak perfect English. And he, even though it hurt his heart, he didn't let us speak Spanish at all, because he didn't want us to develop an accent or have the delay of processing language. Mom wanted us to learn Spanish. Dad didn't. I was angry that I couldn't speak the language that my grandparents spoke. I was very resentful of it. Later, I found out about the hazing and bullying that he went through in the military, the lack of respect, how it affected promotion, all these things, which, by the way, when he left the military, he left the E9. 6% of Marines never get to E9. He left a master gunnery sergeant. He had commendations from 3 different presidents, 2 Bushes and a Clinton. He went out on top.
Yeah.
There was really not more rank to be made. So I'm very proud of what he accomplished, and I'm very proud of the fact that I inherited that discipline and unreasonable standards.
Yeah, man. Well, that's what makes exceptional people, man. You've got to be. You can't be normal. Normal gets normal. Going out and making. Who has 1,300 videos on YouTube? That's not.
Don't be average. Be obsessed.
Yeah.
Be obsessed. I was obsessed with the idea of cultivating knowledge. There's a
Grant Cardone, yeah.
Yeah, there's a exactly so. There's a see, like that's quoting books. Like there's a phrase that I don't know where it originated from, but I learned it by playing Mortal Kombat. Mortal Kombat champion. Like that's why I look like this still. Like the just win 10 Mortal Kombats and you too can, be eternally young. There's a phrase in Mortal Kombat that again says there is no knowledge that is not power. And like I took that to heart. I was like, yes, there is no knowledge that isn't power. And then I was another nerd. I was a nerd that also played Pokemon and Magic the Gathering. In Magic the Gathering, there was this one villain in the card series that they would make all these like evil cards for. His name was Volrath the Fallen. He used to be like, I guess he used to be like a good guy or an angel or something like that, or a priest or something like that. And then he went to the dark side. And he said, if there's a such thing as power, if there's a such thing as enough power, I haven't found it yet. And I've always thought that was a fascinating quote. It speaks to greed and avarice, but if I then relate it to knowledge, and if there is no knowledge, there isn't power. And then if I say, and if there's a such thing as enough power, I haven't found it yet. It talks about the appetite to better oneself, in my opinion. I think that there are people who can take that to an extreme. Do
you know what's on my brain right now?
What's that?
I'm glad you're a nice person. I think someone with your wiring who was like evil,
would be like Roberto like was on the verge of potentially wanting to be a supervillain and take his frustrations and his misery and suffering out in the world and be a villain. Like debated it often. It's like if I stay too long in Twitter, I might get tempted.
Yeah, oh, dude.
Right?
I hear you.
These guys can't learn. It's like, no. If anything, though, I'd I would probably end up like if I was a villain, though, I'd be like Ozymandias from Watchmen. It would be that I would just believe that I could save the world by doing horrible things. Like that would be, that'd be I'm like no one will be reasonable. No one will listen to reason. So I'll do the unreasonable version of saving the world. That's what Ozymandias. I don't know if you're familiar with Watchmen.
I've seen the film.
Okay.
That's about it.
The comic is very similar. It actually is one of the only almost faithful comic adaptations. The only difference in the ending is that the ending in the comics mirrored a comic that was based on an episode of The Twilight Zone called The Architects of Fear, where he faked an alien invasion as the existential threat to humanity to unite us, instead of blaming it on Dr. Manhattan. Dr. Manhattan just left. I think it's actually makes more sense to make the threat Dr. Manhattan to scapegoat him. And I think that makes Ozymandias paints him even more as a villain because of the extra layer of betraying a friend and making a friend a pariah. And so that's what's fascinating to me is that my dark side would look like that. But my point being is that I have always believed that the more you educate yourself, the more options you have, because you'll be able to think your way out of a problem. You won't always be able. What I learned as a kid from being bullied is you won't always be strong enough to fight back physically. You won't always be fast enough to get away. You won't always be able to extricate yourself from a situation through the limitations of either your resources or your body. Or even if you could, you'll miss opportunities where you could know how to apply that. It's not smart. You just weren't rude enough, didn't have options to. And when I realized that that's true, that there's no knowledge that isn't power, that if you were smart enough, you could always find an answer for the problem. And if you're truly smart enough, you can always find a way to do it with hurting the least amount of people. And if you were the smartest person in the world, you could find a way to do it without hurting anyone. And so that is an admirable goal in my mind, is that the ability to solve problems expediently through ruthlessness just usually means finding a utilitarian solution that often involves brutality and extricating the problem. Rude and stem, done.
Yeah.
That's a Game of Thrones like philosophy of just brutality. And you can be clever and not truly intelligent and figure that much out. To do it and then be someone like, say, Tywin Lannister in Game of Thrones and saying, oh, is it less polite to murder a dozen men at dinner than 10,000 on the battlefield? So then it becomes, if you're a lot smarter, it then becomes a numbers game of logistics of, a loss ratio.
Yeah.
And that still is ruthless and somewhat brutal, but it is, as he would say, kinder in its own fashion. I think someone truly, truly intelligent above that will try to find a solution that may not be equitable, where maybe more people leave disappointed than not, but at least it was the least negative impact to all people in the situation, even at the expense of an optimal outcome. That's who Gary Vee is, in my opinion, is Gary Vee finds an optimal enough outcome that maybe everybody isn't as happy as they could be or satisfied or as rich as they could be, but he made it happen in a way where almost nobody had to suffer or take a loss.
I don't know if this is my political brain, but this sounds like communism versus capitalism.
I don't think it is, because the thing is, I think that that's binary thinking. I think that that's black and white.
Oh yeah, no, I think it is. No, just the way you phrased it, like not in terms of what you're saying being political, but with the idea of, every time communism has been tried,
Right.
It's like, okay, everybody dies, and then capitalism, it's not perfect for everybody, but at least
I think of it the way that families operate in a household is that, they'll try to say, it's like, okay, kids, not everyone got what they wanted here, but at least nobody felt like they just straight up lost.
Yeah.
Like, it's like, okay, you didn't get everything you want on your Christmas list, but the thing is, you got enough things that you want, and so did your sister.
Yeah.
Like, and isn't that better? Would you rather have everything that you wanted and your sister be sad? Or would you like put it down to, well, you were older and bigger and born first, so you were able to get this, and that is what,
okay,
and your entitlement came from that. But by the way, you didn't decide to be born first. You didn't decide to be born taller. You didn't you didn't why did that entitle you or earn anything to you? Like, because historically we come from a system that says, oh, well, you're the firstborn son, or you're the male heir, or you're this. It's like, that didn't, why would that entitle you to anything? That's arbitrary. We came from a society that still, in some ways, even though we're mostly delivered from that, has borrowed most of its belief systems from the divine right of kings. And so in that way, manifest destiny is weird, and it's not as meritocracy based as we would like ourselves to believe. We don't have to be an absolute meritocracy. We have to value that in terms of individualism. But the thing is, I've come to the conclusion, and what keeps me good, and what keeps me lawful, and which keeps me lawful good, is because I don't claim to be a moral paragon, and I don't virtue signal like a lot of people do, or try to talk about how good they are. And that's why I also use the word lawful good, is that it's like, because put me in a situation where you become opposed to my friends and family, I might disregard an optimal outcome for you very damn quickly.
Don't mess with Roberto. Don't mess with. If you're listening to the audio here and you're not seeing the video, there was like a Roberto had a moment there. I was like, oh gosh, don't piss this guy off.
You got a glimmer. Yeah. So what I'm getting at with that is that we have to look at the fact that what we can do is, I believe, and I think you've seen me tweet this, is first and foremost, try to be fair. And when fair isn't enough, be kind. And when kind isn't good enough, be generous. Because what I also believe in my thesis of power is that power is what you can give without noticing the difference. That's why I have an abundance mentality versus a scarcity mentality. I realized at some point in life, between all the bullying and all the hardship and everything like that, I realized that my anger was my response for trying to control my fear. And my fear was based on what people were costing me, taking from me, and inflicting on me. And what I realized is that there's no victory that can truly be mine if it's owed to responding to fear. And thus, it's why I'm against reactionaryism. Like, I'm against being a reactionary, because I believe that's dictated by a spirit of fear, scarcity versus abundance, faith, optimism. So I'm opposed to that, because in principle, it's a losing proposition. And I don't think you can really be more ruthless than that, of saying, I'll reject my fear because it's going to shackle me to a loss. It's going to mean that my actions are dictated by the prospect of loss. How can I ever hope to gain if I'm dictated by loss?
Where did you get that from?
I came up with that on my own, as far as I know.
Yeah, no, I'm sorry. I don't mean like you read it from like a script or something. Just like that kind of thing, that kind of thing. You said you read 50 books a year. So
I think that it all adds up. I think
it all adds up. Yeah.
I think it's cumulative. I think I owe where I am to the collective knowledge of human history. That's why I keep saying things like, I don't think I'm that special. It's not to be self-deprecating. It's to say that like who I am is who anybody can be if they benefit enough from the collective experience of everybody who sacrificed and built something before them and generously given of themselves, which is why I think we can all give more. And I think we all should, because I think that we owe it to the species. I think we owe it to ourselves to see what can we become? What can we become? What can we become? Like, I think if you keep saying to yourself, what can I become? And I'm a kid who had a massive imagination. Like, that's what being a creative is. It's why I fight for creativity. It's why I don't want people to be starving artists. I want people to pursue their music, because in pursuing your music and fighting for that, like, you'll learn to be smarter. You'll learn, what can I learn that let me back? Like, can I do a job, even if it's not music, that I despise less, that frees up more time and makes an optimal enough money to fund the dream until the dream can sustain itself? Like, that thinking is the difference between someone who makes it and someone who doesn't. Is that, you know what? I believe in this. I believe in myself. I won't give up my dream. I will become somebody who's strong enough and worthy of living that dream by delivering on the promise of my potential. And that's the message that I really like. I'm seeding it through teaching people the skills, because the problem is I can say that all philosophically. I could do nothing but philosophical videos on YouTube for the rest of my YouTube career and be perfectly happy. But I think that there are so many people doing that without saying, okay, now if you want to be a graphic designer, here is how to use Photoshop. If you want to be a copywriter, here is the software to utilize this and why you should take advantage of Google and open source and blah, blah, blah. If you want to be a web developer, great. Here's how to sell that to somebody who has a business. If you want to be an influencer because maybe you don't have a technical ability and you don't know how to sell that, and what you really want, the only thing that makes you happy is being a performer, let me teach you how to give yourself leverage to perform the way you want by taking a little bit of time to learn how to develop some online passive income to free up more of your time so that you don't have to sell out to get there. Like, I want to teach people practical things, because then if you have resources, you have the luxury of living your philosophy. And that's what I had to learn, is I had to figure out how to optimize being very smart, making enough money so that I could live my truth. I had to really earn that. And I think one of the biggest issues we have in society is that people are having an awakening. They want to live their truth, but they don't even have the means to take care of themselves and be truly independent.
Yeah. Yeah. You need both the philosophy and the practical aspects as well. If you've got one but not the other, then I don't think it sustains in the long term. I think some people know how to do things, but that mindset shift hasn't happened. And then you've got people who, I guess it's the other way around. Yeah, they've had that mindset shift. They know they want to do something. They know they want to write a book, or they want to release an album, or they want to become a YouTuber or whatever. But
they lack the training and the tools and they lack the training, the tools, and often the time, because they also haven't optimized other areas of their life. Like, optimizing other areas of your life. People think that the easy answer is to make more money to free up their time. It's not. It's that you're already not utilizing the time you have efficiently enough. So nothing has to change in your circumstances for you to move the first needle. The problem is society keeps telling them money, money, money. And it's not that I don't believe money buys happiness, because I think that it's a tool that's a wedge, a lever, if you will, a wedge and a lever for happiness. Because I think happiness is not about money, it's about effort and it's about purpose. But I think that money is a tool that you use in that endeavor. And I think that ignoring that is BS. And I think that people saying money isn't money doesn't buy happiness is, I think that it's an incomplete statement. It might be an outright lie, because the thing is, it can buy the tools that you need to achieve happiness. Because the issue with with Mac Miller, Kate Spade, Robin Williams is that they had problems in themselves that need to be fixed, and money couldn't do it by themselves. But with unlimited resources, they didn't reach for the things that could.
Yeah.
And that's the sinister thing about it, is that there are people who the only reason they're not better is they can't afford the tools and resources to get better. I think, and I don't pretend to have all the answers. I'm not a therapist. I'm not a doctor. And the new thing in YouTube and in social media is to call out everybody on their credentials and everything like that. So here's the thing: I have zero credentials on this, other than being a smartass who's lived with money, not lived with money, who's almost committed suicide multiple times, and has had their own mental health journey. And so when I say to you that money may not fix everything that's wrong with you, and may not fix your happiness. In fact, it's more likely to amplify the internal issues when you realize that now that my external demons are gone, I realize that fighting my external demons and having that crucible was actually occupying me and making the voices quiet. And by voices, I mean your self-doubt, your self-loathing and hatred, your insecurity, everything that tells you you're not good enough. When you've slain all the dragons, your inner demons are left to their own devices to get very quiet because you ain't got nothing else to do.
Yeah.
And that's why not living your purpose is a problem. Here's the other problem. When you are held up to a standard and called a champion, and everyone expects you to be a champion, they're going to mourn the champion, not you. The human being, the person that you were, that struggled, that fought so hard. They don't see that. They see the glory. They see the trophies. They see the awards. They see the bank account, the mansion, the houses, the accolades, your follower count, your platinum record, whatever it is. They're mourning for the dream of being like you. They're mourning the highlight reel of your life being over. They're not mourning you. And that's the real sinister, sad thing about all this, is that they know that. They know that. And that's the fear that keeps people from reaching out, because judgment, because how dare I rob people of that idea they have of me and reveal to them the reality.
Yeah.
That makes me the thing, because everyone's afraid to be a fraud. Everyone's afraid to be a fraud. And that's why imposter syndrome is one of the hardest things for a creative person, for an entrepreneur, for an influencer. It's why, do you realize our entire community lives in terror of somebody making a video, quote unquote, exposing them? Because it's not that people usually have done anything that's so god awful, or not anything that any of us have done and everything like that. It sucks for me so much that people want to paint PewDiePie as this horrible, racist, Nazi. Like, it's like, that's not who he is. Like, I don't claim to know Felix or whatever, but any interaction I've had with him has shown me that he's just a guy.
Yeah.
Like, he's just a guy.
Yeah.
He's a guy who likes video games and like edgy jokes and doesn't always get it right, and is very aloof. If anything, he's too earnest. If anything, he's too unguarded. If anything, like, you know, and I think he's a good person. Like, but I'm also wondering, blah, 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 right? I say it's like every has a version of themselves they don't like, and their deepest fear is that's exposed and magnified to everyone. And I think that social media makes that not only a fear for our community, I think even just for the regular person. I mean, you got kids getting beat up and then it's put on the internet for everybody to see. If you're a kid and you make a mistake, you can't even change schools or change towns. Your worst day of your life will follow you forever and be hung over your head. Why are we surprised that more people are identifying with being depressed? Or we saw some stuff like recently about social anxiety and the idea that maybe people are faking it. I'm like, everyone's living in terror of being exposed. Everyone's living in terror of being taken out of context. Everyone's ability to be judged just went from 12 people that they see every day
Oh boy.
to the potential of the entire world.
Tell me about it.
Why the hell wouldn't everyone have heightened anxiety? Why the hell wouldn't everybody be quote unquote soft? Like, why the hell when we have, you realize that like 60% of Americans, according to like MSNBC Money, like don't have $1,000 in savings in the bank. Half of boomers, the hardest working generation of people, 50% of them have zero in retirement savings, and 80% of Americans don't have $10,000 in savings in the bank. $1,000, that might as well be, you wreck your car that you need to go to work, you can't fix it, you can't pay the deductible. 60% of Americans can't do that. You get into any kind of altercation, you get into a bar fight, it's not your fault or whatever. It's like 60% of Americans can't come up with bail. 60% of Americans can't come up with bail.
Yeah.
Like that's ridiculous. Like $10,000 don't have a medical emergency. 80% of Americans can't withstand the medical deductible for their health without being wiped out. If one of your kids has a health issue, it's going to wipe out your entire savings. If you're 80% of Americans, like why wouldn't people have anxiety? Why wouldn't people be depressed? And by the way, most people working a job they don't like, being pressured by looking at Instagram and influencers and their obsession with social media to buy shit they don't need off of the money from that job that they don't like with the little bit that they make extra, and often to not be judged inferior by people they don't even like and people they don't even know.
Yeah.
I mean,
So
people be depressed and anxious. Why can't we believe that if that's 80% of people who don't have enough, let's talk, and then the other 20% of people don't even think they deserve it, and that the 20% of people who are successful, most of them don't think they deserve it, think that they themselves are a fraud in some way, shape, or form, or they can't trust their friends because their friends are hangers-on because they have shit. Why can't we believe that most people are probably depressed and anxious when I paint that picture? And it's all based in numbers and facts.
It's weird. It's the curse of a successful society, certainly economically and technologically. It's a weird one. Yeah, I mean, I joke, but it's only a half joke. But I often say that we're currently just living in the biggest social experiment ever. So like this whole social media thing, like Twitter, Instagram, YouTube, Facebook, like we do not know the long term. We do not know the long term.
I'm not a doctor, but like I've read stuff where like physically we're being affected by it because we don't blink enough because of the screen. So more people are buying glasses. I found out that like you, and if you don't believe me, why do you think Warby Parker has a glasses subscription service? Like, why do you think that that's a business? Like, it's a multi-million-dollar company. Like, do you think that that would be successful if more people weren't needing glasses?
Yeah.
Like, sitting down, do you realize like people's blood pressure? They're looking at this. It's like we have a society where like that's a lot of people's jobs more than it's ever been. Blood circulation. Most Americans have a vitamin D deficiency because we're not outside enough, because we're not working outside labor-based jobs. Yeah. So like this is real stuff. Social media has physiological implications for you. Like whether it's when we were worried about the radiation from the phones, which no one talks about anymore, but we're all on Bluetooth headphones, but we don't know what that's going to do.
Yeah. And you got 5G coming too.
We got 5G, we got Wi-Fi. We have no idea what the physiological stuff is from all these invisible signals. And we can't trust the companies because they'll cover it up. And we can't trust the government to regulate them, because the thing is, it's like I'm a capitalist, I'm an entrepreneur, so it's not like I'm the biggest fan of government regulations, but I'm also a humanist, which means what I'm not a fan of is radiation, unclean water, and I want someone held responsible for that, and I want standards that protect me from that. I like seatbelts in cars. Like
I got you.
You know, so like I don't want tech companies to like, I'm not worried about the tech oligarchs, and I'm not worried about like, it's not like I fully trust Google or Facebook and everything. Like, I just don't like, I'm a private enough person to where like, I just don't communicate things electronically if I'm worried about them. You know what I'm saying? Like but what I'm worried about is I'm worried about everyone worried about that and not worried about the invisible signals, the radiation, it affecting our brain chemistry, what it does to our environment that then influences our bodies. Because like you can't really undo that at a certain point.
Yeah.
And we can't trust them to be honest about it because of the class action lawsuits. So like what I mean, didn't we have something recently where like this company got called out, like I think it was Roundup, I want to say, or something like that, allegedly about literally causing like cancer, and like, you know, this guy's family sued, and like Roundup was like on the shelves of Walmart. It was this whole big thing recently.
Well, I don't even know what Roundup is. What is that?
It's a weed killer. It's a pesticide.
Oh, okay.
I think you must have heard about like how this pesticide, like this like weed killer, was potentially causing cancer.
I don't think I did. Maybe that's being here in the UK, but
Okay, yeah, it might be because you're in the UK. Like, but here in the States, like it was a big deal. Like, and it's one of the major conglomerates that like kind of makes everything. You know, like we have these big companies here, these conglomerates that like make everything that's on our shelves. Like, and it's a like I'm, as a citizen, I'm more worried that there's more of that happening in tech than people think about that affects us. They know, you know how they talked about how the fact that they know that social media is addictive now. They literally know
They
that
design it to be.
but they did like studies where like, and again, I'm not a doctor or anything like that. I just read this stuff on the internet and then like
Checking the dopamine or something like that, and serotonin.
it's the dopamine, but it's also like there's signal centers in the brain and everything like that. And when you take away, or when someone does a social media detox, you know how like, oh, I quit social media for 30 days. Like you're hearing more stories about that, but they're doing some studies, like nothing that's super, super concrete, but they're realizing that there's withdrawal symptoms that are similar to when people quit smoking or quit alcohol. Like, so that means it's literally having that kind of impact in people. Like, I mean, have you ever just like casually noticed yourself reaching for your phone for no reason?
Absolutely, man. I'm super conscious of it. As someone who's, you know, I'm sure like yourself, as someone who's a large part of what I do is based on social media. You know, I'm a musician. I'm trying to get my art out there. I'm trying to get my message out there. I'm communicating with people. I'm doing this podcast. So I try to be very conscious about my usage. And I can tell when I'm going overboard with it. And if I'm doing specific things, like I'll purposely, like as we're doing this podcast, like my phone's in another room. So I don't want it on my desk. I don't even want it in the room, because here's another thing. I don't know if you're aware of this. Like, yeah, they found that just your phone being in the same room reduces attention span. Even if it's not in your hand, you're not looking at it, just knowing. Exactly. Yeah, so stuff like that. I've read that kind of stuff, and I'm just like, wow. Like, to be honest with you, if I weren't a musician and I weren't, you know, I wasn't someone who was really trying to build a big audience, I think I would have downgraded by now. I think I would have just gone and got like got a flip phone, and you know, if I want a music player, just buy an MP3 player, buy an iPod, and then just have a flip phone. People can tell me I'm weird or whatever, but I really think I would have gone down that route.
I don't disagree with you. If I wasn't like an entrepreneur, I'd have like a flip phone or a BlackBerry. It's like there was even like when smartphones were first coming out, like, and getting like I was still on the like kick. I liked having the type with the screen, like type with the keyboard thing, and I was just texting. I was a big texter. Like I didn't like if I want to surf the internet, I'll use my laptop. Like I was like, that's how I was. Like, so for me, that was a whole thing. The technology and the addiction and stuff like that. I like what like Matt D'Avella is like talking about with minimalism. I like a lot of the, like, you know, I think about it all the time. Like I bought these glasses because they're blue light tinted, because I'm in front of the screens all the time, because it reduced migraines, because I used to have migraines and I realized that was the screen time. And now like when I regulate it a bit more and I take a lot of breaks, I take a break every 90 minutes unless I'm doing a live stream or something. But like I realized that was a factor. I also realized I wasn't blinking enough if I stare at screens, and they've like found that that's a problem and that hurts your eyes. And so dries them out. And that's like a lot of people. So I also put plants in the room here because I found out some stuff about like how being around electronics all the time and like versus needing that to actually how it affects the air, you know, like, and how the components, like we have these dust filters in our computers and everything like that. We haven't realized, like, as far as the air filtration that's blowing out from the computer, what's happening there and what that's putting out, and that we're breathing that in. We haven't thought about these things. Like, I've thought a lot about it because I found out from a lot of my friends working in IT and everything like that about how the server rooms are and how they do like clean rooms and all these things and everything like that, and about like the actual, when we clean out a computer that's been running for a long time and you see what comes out of that computer and you realize that you've been breathing some of that in, you think very differently about things. So like, but again, most people, this is over their head, right? Like that's a thing. So like, I'm not even sure how we got partly even to that tangent. I'm really not. But I think, we were talking about society. Well, we were talking about like how social media and technology escalated the anxiety and depression part of society. Like I believe that, but I also think we have a crisis of a lack of purpose.
Absolutely. And I think that's, you've alluded to Jordan Peterson a couple of times. I think that's been the key reason behind his rapid rise, is because, I've been listening to him. I've been following his stuff for over 3 years now. So it's really been interesting watching that trajectory. If you go on he actually commented on one of my YouTube videos. So
that's
yeah. I think I'm one of the only people who's got a comment from Jordan Peterson on a video.
Like, I'm actually surprised he watches other people's YouTube videos. Like, that's interesting. Because I wouldn't think he spends as much time on other people's YouTube content.
This was a couple years ago, so this is before he was where he is now.
Okay, so that's interesting.
Yeah.
When he was just doing, I think because he'd been posting his lectures to YouTube for a while, which I appreciate. A lot of people that are in academia have actually gotten into that over the years. I've seen for years college professors have been posting their lectures as videos to YouTube, especially for students who may have missed it or like want a refresher. I always thought that like college should do that in general. Like, but then I think they think they're competing with themselves and everything like that, which is a whole nother thing of my message of like, I want to like, before I get into something else interesting about both Tony Robbins, Jordan Peterson, and motivational speakers, I want to tell you about an ambition that I haven't told a lot of people in these interviews. Or let me rephrase that. I haven't told people why I want to be a millionaire. I'm not a millionaire yet. I'm 100,000 there. Like, I do all right. But no full-time employees is part of that, which also sucks on another end. But if you have full-time employees, you got to pay people right, know? Yeah. Like I believe in that. You got to pay people right, but you got to hold them accountable. So you got to make more money if you want to hire people. And I want to do that because that's how you scale. But I want to be a multimillionaire because I can use that money as leverage to disrupt education and elevate people. And by that, I mean, I know that the automation is coming. I know that retail is dying. You keep hearing me talk about it in Twitter over and over. And why do I talk about it? I'm in Georgia and I was in North Carolina. I live in the South. I'm watching the jobs go away. I'm watching the plants close. I'm watching the mall be dead. I'm watching people buy into a small business franchise and go under in 2 years because of no foot traffic. I'm watching it happen. I'm watching people literally go out of business. Okay. So like, and I'm also watching people and looking at people that have value to offer the market, that have a chronic illness or chronic pain or something or a disability that can do more, but are said, well, we won't hire you. They like get a job is the most bullshit thing I've ever heard from anybody, because it presumes that people haven't thought of that, which is ridiculous. And then I'm sorry, what do you tell to that like kid who like, messed up at 16 and has a record for something that's like stupid, just being a stupid kid, but they got a record. It's not expunged. They've changed. It's 8 years later and no one will give them a shot because, you got flagged by this background check, by this algorithm. It doesn't matter how good you are. It doesn't matter how much you've lived your life better. It doesn't matter that was one time. Like when I look at that, like telling those people to get a job, you might as well just be throwing them away and telling them they're garbage. So like, what do? Remember what I said: training, tools, and barrier for people to a success, to have the time in yourself and your craft. What are you going to really do? And also people are in a framework of selling their time instead of selling a result that they produced. So that's a problem.
Something I'm working on myself.
If you don't have, we'll talk about like, if you don't have the tools that allow you to differentiate yourself from the other 90% of the market, how are you going to get better? How are you going to get more? How are you going to get what you need? Especially what you need to match your ambition and to match your potential and deliver on your value. You can be the greatest musician, artist, this, that, next to the other. You still need a good microphone. When people tell you that, oh, the tools don't matter, I call BS, because it exists for a reason. And almost everyone telling you that has the tool that they need and wouldn't want to do. They could do what they do without it, but they won't even be motivated to do it on something subpar. Okay. So like, that's real. And then training, without being able to really capitalize on your natural gifts or something that you're good at, or something where you can make use of yourself. How do you deliver any value to the market? You know, in the old world, someone would pass on their tools and their training and invest their time into their son or daughter to run the family business, or to follow in their footsteps and be that blacksmith, or that tailor, or that tanner, or the local doctor, or the carpenter, or whatever it is for the community. Because to be part of a community, you have to deliver value, you know, and that's where that, you know, comes from. In a tribe, people weren't allowed to just be in the tribe and not deliver value. Yeah. And the thing is, your value wasn't always, they always found a way. Even if you like weren't a big strapping lad, you always found a way. Like there was always like, well, we found something you can do. We'll optimize this. Or here, learn the lore of our people and be the historian, be the scribe, because guess what? You can't hunt, you can't fish, but everybody can learn like the history of the people, and there you go. You're a living record. You have value to the community, you know? Like, so there's something to that. That's why I say there's a crisis of purpose, is that it's partly that people aren't even being given a chance in some cases, because we're screening them and we're being precious about who's allowed to be worthy to have more and to have an opportunity and to have a chance. If you truly democratize education in a way, you can level the playing field. As for tools, that's called open source. And then if you teach people how to be productive and to optimize their time and eliminate distractions, then like what Gary Vee talks about, with like, he gets a bad rap on the hustle thing and telling people to work their nights and weekends. And then people talk about, oh, he's talking about, if you're dissatisfied with your life, you have to separate yourself from the rest of people that are dissatisfied with their life. You can only do that through action. And the thing is, you might have to give up the luxury of spending more time with your family for a little while to spend time with them whenever you want.
Yep.
You know, like that's what I talk about. Remember, with optimal outcomes. And by the way, if you were more trained, more like, and smarter, maybe you'd have a better answer than working harder. But you're not. Everyone wants to think that they can work smarter. A lot of times they can't. Even I couldn't do that initially. I had to work harder first. And then I could work smarter. Because like that's just sometimes the way it is. And if you can't accept that truth, if you live in the delusion, then you're waiting to be saved by circumstances or a savior. And I just believe you can be your own champion. And I think that it starts with saying, I have the same 24 hours in the day as the poorest person in the world and the richest person in the world. And the difference between us is how we make use of that time. And there's time that I'm not required to work for my survival. And there's time that I need to sleep. And how do I make sure that everything in between, that I give as little to it as possible? And then how do I deploy what I have left to maximum advantage of what I need the most, or what will change something the most for me, or what I'm best at, or what I really need to be better at to affect everything else? I think part of the foundation of that, at least for me, is I think you start with optimizing your time to work out more, or to eat healthier, or to clean out your mind, or to fix your environment. Because I think if you do that first, it's the foundation of all your other actions. If your big barrier is that you say, I don't have enough time and I don't have enough energy, if you spend your time fixing your body, then every task you do becomes more efficient and takes less time.
Amen.
You know what I'm saying? Amen. Yeah.
I know. I'm you know me. I'm big on my. I'm a huge fitness advocate. So.
Yeah, but it's real. If you fix that, then everything is better. And then if you fix things mentally, like if you learn to read faster and you start to read more, you can process information faster. You can optimize your decisions. If you learn something new every day, you have another tool and a resource to pull out to combat the world every single day. because now you have that. If you feel discouraged because you're downtrodden and people are looking down on you, if you learn something new every day and you educate yourself and you read, there comes a point where you can level the playing field against those people because they can't talk down to you because you have the same baseline of information they have. Everybody went to school and got a degree. Get the damn reading list and beat them. Get the same reading list, and they probably didn't read the book cover to cover that they were assigned. You can, and then you can beat them. And now you know things they don't know. And now you have leverage, and now you have a seat at the table. So like, I think you can elevate yourself by maximizing your time and saying, I will take joy in building myself rather than indulging in a distraction to give myself relief from my hardship. If instead of playing, I played video games, but when I stopped playing them as much and I decided to double down on my art, when I decided to double down on my craft, life got better because I had more opportunities, because now I turned my joy into the pursuit of, oh, you know what's really fun? Playing video games was fun. Making a few extra bucks to spend how I want is a lot more fun. Making a few extra bucks so I don't have to borrow money from my friends for entertainment when we go to the movies or go out, that's more fun because now I'm not being shamed or feeling guilty. So, it's good. It's fun to have gas money. It's to give my friend so I addressed my lack of self-esteem and my situation of being broke with giving myself more chances to win, and by building myself up, and like that was working harder more than it was working smarter initially.
Yeah.
And that's part of what made me successful. And then the other thing is tools. My grandma gave me a computer. Like, I don't think I'd be where I am if that wasn't like a thing. But now everyone has a phone that's better than the computer I had.
Oh gosh.
Like, and has the same things on it and more and more. You can produce video, audio, a podcast, edit, photography. People are making a 6-figure income with not even a fancy camera or microphone like me and you. Just this. And even if it's not a 6-figure income, there are people making $60,000, $40,000, $30,000 a year and living modestly and living on their own terms because they utilize this and the internet, and that's it. And they don't have to work a 9-to-5 job. They don't have to trade time for money anymore that way. They don't have to suffer and then live for distractions, because that's all anyone does is they live for their distractions. They live for the relief from their burden that's tied to their survival. And I'm like, if you can live modestly and not spend a lot of money while simultaneously learning the side hustle and make more money, eventually replace the money that you traded so much time for by now trading results for money instead, and building systems or doing something or trading on your talent and make equal money. Now you don't have an excuse for not living on your own terms because you can trade. And that's like a first level step. Or if you want a career, you can have the one you want because you elevated yourself to a level of skill and ability or built a network that gives you the ability to work for that company or work in that industry and have that title because that was the dream. Yeah. Like, because not everyone wants to work for themselves, and that's fine. Great. But why are you working your third choice? Why can't you like put yourself in a position to get your first choice? What would that take? And if that just means, is it a year of inconvenience? Because why not? Because you're already suffering. What's a little inconvenience?
Yeah.
So like, that's what I believe, and that's why I lived. And that's why I think when you look at like Tony Robbins and Lewis Howes and Jordan Peterson, all wildly different people, and you can agree with them and disagree with them, I think that baseline of what they believe is consistent with what successful people believe. But what I believe, and why I say I want to be a multimillionaire, is that what if someone like me, and what if I inspire other people to do this? I'm going to do this for creative types. If I had millions upon millions of dollars in disposable income from my businesses and my ventures, like Gary Vee right now has a net worth of, I think, 180 million to $250 million in net worth. A lot of people don't realize that. And he made most of it, like, from my understanding, from his investments, which is what people don't understand. Because when you have a 200 million a year agency, you don't pocket that. VaynerMedia is a 200 million, 250 million a year agency, but 30% or so is taxes. And then 50% of the remainder is overhead because he pays people well. And he has 900 employees, 900 people. And the top 100 of those people are paid very, very well.
Yeah.
And the other 800 are paid fairly.
Mhm.
Like, that's a lot of money walking out the door. And we haven't even gotten into the actual expenses of the business. It's just 50% of its salaries after taxes. So like the margin on a successful business like that is usually 15 to 30%. And that still has to go into the coffers of the business and then the shareholders and then the owners. So like, I don't think that Gary is pocketing tens of millions from Vayner every year. I could be wrong. I just don't necessarily think that it works that way.
Yeah.
I think he has even said that there are points where Vayner operated like they made money, but he's like, it might be a wash. Like, I think he said that in the past.
Yeah.
And that's kind of how he paid himself from the family business too, was he didn't take a lot of salary.
Yeah.
I say that to say this. What I would do with my millions and my plan, if I am blessed enough to be able to work that hard, is that what if I bought out a few people from academia and said, hey, I'm going to pay you up front or half and half to do the same kind of thing that you do for the university, but I'm not going to put shackles on you. I'm going to make you do it on video. I'm going to build a system to distribute it in all the video platforms and in audio. I'm going to pay you for your time. I'm going to have you do a podcast and put some context and some interviews and give more of your thoughts and opinions on your subject matter and establish that.
Mhm.
I'm going to do that. I'm going to write you a check to buy you out, like buy you away, at least for a little while, from academia and give it away.
Yeah.
And I'm going to do that. I'm going to subsidize, because we talk about how can we subsidize everybody's education? How can we give everybody free college? It's as simple as literally picking the academics, buying them out, writing them a check, putting the information that they deliver year after year that doesn't even change on the record, paying them to give them the time to write a book, and we can sell the book to make a little bit of the money back and give them a royalty so that they can make money in perpetuity. And we give them a royalty on some of the IP that we develop with them. We can literally just buy willing academics that are getting ready to retire or are young and ambitious and want to say, screw it, I'll exit the administration and we'll do it together. We can literally kind of like commoditized and hooked on phonics the same education and sell it much cheaper by productizing the education. I'd rather we productize the education and say, hey, anyone who can't afford to go to college and is disciplined and a self-learner and is going to do it themselves and is an autodidactic learner, here you go. It's affordable now, and a lot of it's free here on the internet. And now you don't like, and your mom. And as for your mommy and daddy, yeah, you won't get a degree, but it's coming from an accredited source because we got Professor so and so and everything like that. That former head of like blah 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 at Pace University or whatever, to give you a free education because we paid for it and everything like that. So I mean, if the government won't do it, I feel like entrepreneurs can say, hey, I'm passionate about a field,
Yep.
and if I've got money, I'll buy out an academic, subsidize them putting content out for free on all these platforms. And literally it's the same lecture that all of their competitors are charging $2,000 per class for. And like, why don't I just write them a check for more money than they're going to make teaching and call it a day?
Yeah. You should, you know what, you should talk to, if you can reach him, you should talk to Jordan Peterson about this, because I know he's got some similar ideas. I know he wants to create an online university. I don't know what stage he's at with it, but I know that's one of his big long-term things. So I think you should actually reach out to him. And
I think as somebody who he's experienced being jaded by the education system, I have tremendous respect for teachers, by the way. I think teachers are overworked and underpaid. Like, this isn't to eliminate their jobs. And I don't think you will. I mean, the college scandal showed us that there are people who just want the piece of paper and the credential or want the association. And more power to them, whatever. But like, I did a video about that. But like, my thought is that we can monetize people's actual potential if their barriers to entry are non-existent. By the way, it also, if there's Elon, and then there's a formalized system of learning that people can respect, because like, I'll teach people stuff, but there are people who don't respect it because I don't have a degree or because I can't give someone a degree. All I know is like, look, I built a 6-figure business. You're going to go 6 figures in debt to learn from a business school and get an MBA from somebody who never built a six-figure business and never had a six-figure income.
Yeah.
It's like, who's not going to teach you the reality of living with it. Like on top of how to make the money, how to live with it, like how to understand the mental toughness aspect of entrepreneurship, to understand and navigate the reality of social media and the culture and, you know, and the technology. So like, yeah. So like, I mean, yeah, it'd be interesting to have like because I think like it would be, well, my thing was obviously creativity and technical fields.
Sure.
Peterson would be doing more of your, the translation of the more, I would say, academic based fields to that, which is very fascinating and interesting. So I'd love to see him do that. It'd be interesting to see what someone like him does with that. Because I think if he does it, it'll be much more laissez-faire than a lot of people would because of his own experience with administration. So that would be a tremendous contribution. And I think he'd get more credit for something like that versus like everything else.
Yeah.
Like, to be fair to him, like, you know, like I think that anybody doing something like that is going to actually change the world.
Absolutely.
Like I think anybody, like, because it's one of those all hands on deck things. You don't have to agree with him. You don't have to like him. If he gets people free education, degree or no degree, that empowers them to make a difference in their life from people, and also gets academics into entrepreneurship and gets them to be part of the 21st century knowledge commerce part of the economy that is evolving. It's already a multi-billion-dollar industry. People don't realize that.
Yeah.
Like e-learning is a multi-billion. It's about, I think it's like what? It's like, I think I read it. That's like it's $167 billion a year or some absurd, some absurd number like that.
Is that globally?
Yes.
Okay.
But it's digital. It's e-learning. It's like, yeah, it's global. Like, so like that's like that. No, that's not US. That's global. Like, I mean, you have to take into account like all these subscription services in addition to courses and things of that nature and everything like that. So it's combining, I think, the numbers of like all the knowledge commerce hosting platforms, your Teachables, your Udemy's, all of those things, Skillshare, with other ones, plus I think the universities that have gone digital. I think combined all of those together for those numbers. And if I can find the article, I'll get it to you. But like, it's fascinating to me that more people aren't talking about that and aren't talking about the way you could disrupt education for the empowerment, because everyone wants to make money off of it. But like, I'm talking about, you could straight up disrupt things, because if people get skills, they can deliver on skills in a world that's becoming much more entrepreneurial, and where entrepreneurs are creating jobs and we don't care about degrees. I'm an entrepreneur. When I hire freelancers, I care about one thing. What can you do for me? What can you do to save me time? What can you do to make me money? I can't pass on the cost of your degree to my customer. So why the hell does it matter to me? What matters to me is, because people go this, if two people are of equal talent, you pick the one with the degree. No, I picked the one that I like the most. I picked the one that I'm going to yell at. I picked the one I'm going to yell at least, or the one that can put up with me.
Yeah.
Like, you know what I'm saying? Like, I picked that one, or I picked the one that I can pay less. Like, to be frank, like entrepreneurial wise, you pick it's like, oh, you think you're entitled to more money because you have a degree, but you're only as good as this person that was a hustler. Yeah. It's like, who says, hey, I'll do it for less and screw the vacation days. I'm hungry. Yeah. You're hired. College brat, you're not. You're it's like college brat, like good next opportunity. You'll be fine. You got a degree, right? Yeah. It's like, this guy's hungrier than you. He doesn't feel entitled at all. It's like, I jump, he says how high. Great. You're hired. You're like, to be very real with you, this is the conversation like homies have all the time about how crazy the rest of the world is for like glorifying this, like, oh, you got a degree. I'm like, I don't care. I care about your work ethic. I care about who you are as a person. I care about you, how ambitious you are. I care about how you serve my mission, or whether we're aligned. Yeah. Like, your degree is shorthand for telling me that you can take orders and that you can follow, and that, oh, you're consistent enough to show up. I'm like, it's not that hard if you didn't have to. I'm not disrespecting anybody. I went to college, by the way. I left for a reason. Yeah. Like, my work ethic was such that, like, because I also had to survive, is that I didn't have a car I was getting rides from my friends, or I was taking and from getting dropped off at school, I was then taking the city bus to my job at the mall as an assistant manager at KB Toys to do my job. And often I would leave in the middle of class if there was an emergency at the store, or I would be coming in from the store taking the bus after a shift to go to class. And all I would do is get shit on by my professors for being late, when I'm sitting here paying cash, not being in debt, didn't have parents to do it for me. I'm a paying customer, and you're shitting on me because you feel disrespected because I showed up late. When I'm working every day to be here, I'm working harder than everybody else. I'm suffering more to be here and doing it directly out of pocket on nobody's dime to be here more than everyone else. And I have more to lose than anybody else. And because I'm sitting here competing with working to pay my bills and to take care of myself and to also further myself and be here. You think that me showing up late is me not caring because you're judging me without context, right? Eliminating that paradigm means something to me. So that's why work ethic matters more to me, because look at everything I accomplished without getting a 4-year degree. Look at everything I did and built. And I have friends with 6-year degrees and MBAs that make less money than me, are less happy than me, and who have
less control as well. I mean,
less personal power, less freedom.
Yeah.
That's a big deal. So why are we marketing and selling to everybody this idea that college is the only way to a better life, when personal development is a guarantee of whatever you choose to define as a better life?
Yeah. I think people are waking up to it. I think we're in that transition period. I really do believe it. I think, and some of these scandals coming out, and the fact that you're getting so many people graduating with degrees. I know this is happening a lot in the UK. People are graduating with degrees every year and, then struggling to find jobs, or the jobs they're getting, they didn't need the degree for.
That's the same here in the US. You guys are going through that over the pond too.
Yeah, it's happening here. So I think people are, even I finished university, man, I can't believe this, 11 years ago. It doesn't seem that long. Yeah. And obviously, I'm an Oxford graduate, so I'm I'm big on higher education. What's that?
I hear that's a good school.
Yeah, that's what people say. But it's even with myself, even in that period, the way I look at university or college just now, 10 years later, it's actually shifted quite a lot as the world and the economy has changed. If you asked me 10, 15 years ago, I would have said that pretty much everybody, if you can afford it, pretty much everybody, you may as well go to university. Keep in mind as well, in the UK, it used to be a lot cheaper. It's still way cheaper than it is in the US. But, university in the UK, when I was in university, it cost about a quarter of what it does now.
Wow.
Yeah. And this is in 12 years.
Yeah. When I remember when I was in school back in the early 2000s at community college, you could take individual classes for a few $100s.
Yeah.
Few $100s.
Yeah.
Per credit. It was, again, I could work not always 40 hours a week, and I could pay for tuition and save up the money and pay for my tuition. Without loans. I was so stubborn because, where I grew up, there was this whole sentiment of never taking anything from the government and all of that and everything. But it's also why you shouldn't join things or join ideologies, because when I was younger, I found myself often, as much as I felt independent and rebellious, I'd find sometimes that I would gravitate too much toward of the few friends I had or the teachers that I admired. I would take up too many of their habits or their stances without thinking it through. And I didn't take Pell Grant money, which is money that you don't have to pay back. That is to help people further themselves in their education and to be able to take care of themselves so that you could be a student,
Okay.
And I didn't get to focus on my studies because I refused to take money from anybody. And that's a little bit stubborn and arrogant and unnecessary when you don't have to pay it back. And when you're trying to do a good thing and they're trying to invest in you doing a good thing. And so I tell people, if you get Pell Grant or you get scholarship, take it, whatever. Me not taking money from anybody and wanting to do it myself, it sounds more admirable than it is.
Yeah.
What it is it's arrogance.
Yeah.
And that's part of being young. And because I suffered way harder than I needed to. And I put my body and my mind, I abused myself more than I needed to, because that would have offered me a little bit more leverage. And then I could have done an optimal choice, an optimal outcome. But ideology and rhetoric and adopting stances that weren't my own and that I hadn't come to my own conclusion on, and also, again, not wanting to feel shamed, because I felt like if I did that, my friends and those people wouldn't respect me because I took money from the government. So that's why I keep saying things like society. Yep, society really is to blame, because again, I got into some very tough financial situations and felt like a loser and felt bad about myself because I wasn't delivering on my potential, and I didn't take all the tools that were available to me. And why didn't I? Because I felt guilty or shamed when I shouldn't have. And some of that's on me, but also there were outside influences. Sure. So that's why I'm very passionate about a stance of individuality and think for yourself and all of those things. And that we should invest in people. Someone investing in, it turns out that Roberto Blake was a really good investment back in the day. I've contributed to society. Yeah. But think about the fact that I almost robbed myself of the opportunity and cheated anyone I've ever helped, because I almost took myself out early. I almost committed suicide so many times. I almost said I wasn't worth it so many times. And the thing is, there were opportunities for me to have some relief. There were opportunities for me to have less hardship. There were opportunities for me to suffer less that I opted out of willfulness, And it's opportunities that other people would love to have. And so that is something that, I live with, and that I still feel some guilt over, even of how dare I have been that conceited, that arrogant to have turned down an investment in myself. Yeah. I would never, if someone came to me as a mentee and contemplated doing that, I would punch them. Yeah. Yeah, man. I would drag them into that office you're taking that money, damn it. You'll thank me later. No, there's no way. If I could Back to the Future, Biff Tannen myself, oh yeah. So I think about these things all the time, and it's why it's my not so secret ambition is that everything I'm doing now is part of the experiment from a framework that I'm doing, and everything I'm doing is in the service of my singular goals of bettering everybody and basically eliminating the suffering that I experienced in another generation of people by what I build and what I accomplish, and elevating the creative people, because the creative spirit is beaten and driven out of people, and they're forced to suffer and to settle. The greatest artists, the greatest audio engineers, the greatest people I've met talent-wise in my life are somewhere bagging groceries, tending bar, working jobs they don't hate, working at a correctional facility. I'm kidding you not. I'm blanking out people's names even mentally so I don't slip and call no one out. But these are these are friends I grew up with. These are people I know. These are people that I take a vacation with once a year. Yeah. And that's the only time I ever see them, because they don't have options. And they don't have options because there's a framework that didn't deliver for them on their God-given ability.
So that's what you want to create for. That's what you want to create for people, basically.
I want to create a framework that delivers on people's potential and their God-given ability, and I want them to do it at a lesser price than I paid.
Gotcha.
I want them to do it because it's that cycle of suffering in my lifetime has to end with me. That's a really very aggressive personal goal, is that no more starving artists, no more needless suffering of the intellectual, no more mediocrity for misfits, no more.
Awesome, man. I think that's a very good place to end. I've never gone this long on a podcast before.
Sure. No, I'm a little bit of a motor mouth.
No, dude, it's awesome, man. There's so many gems in here. If it's cool, afterwards, I'd love to, chat to you a little bit personally on a couple of bits, but
a little bit in every one.
Awesome. So what I'll do though is if you let everybody know where they can find you online, man.
You guys can find me at Roberto Blake in all social media. Hit me up on my Instagram at Roberto Blake, because That's like motivation and mindset, and a public daily journal of the reality of being a creative and being an entrepreneur and being somebody who doesn't fit in. And so it's like, I'm raw, I'm real, even when it's not fun over in the Instagram. Over on the YouTube channel, youtube.com/Roberto Blake 2. That's the number 2. Over 1,000 videos, I think 1,300 and counting right now, teaching you social media marketing, entrepreneurship, and high income skills that you can use to fight your way to financial freedom. Like, and you get the real talk on it. No, like no BS, no fluff. Just once in a blue moon, a sales pitch, but the on something that I built to help you. Yeah. And over on Twitter, you can hit me up for the conversation anytime at Roberto Blake.
Awesome. Make sure you follow Roberto. Like I said, I've been following him for a couple of years, and as you've probably gained from this podcast, he is a gold mine of information, motivation, and now we've got some awesome philosophy as well. It's been really cool actually going into the inner workings and seeing what makes you tick. I've really appreciated that.
Yeah, absolutely, man. I mean, you bring out the best, some people would argue the worst in me in that regard.
Awesome, man. Thank you so much for coming on the podcast. Roberto Blake, this is Real Talk with Zuby.